Canadian province of Ontario says it will slap a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the U.S.
We read in Politico that Ontario Premier Doug Ford threatened to shut off his province's electricity exports to the United States.
Canada has long been regarded as a stable and safe haven in North America, thanks to its strong trade relations with the United States. However, the recent tariff crisis is beginning to expose cracks in this long-standing partnership. Prime Minister Mark Carney's outspoken rhetoric is shaking the foundation of the Canadian-American relationship. On March 27, 2025, Carney boldly declared that the era of close ties with the United States has come to an end. While some initially dismissed it as an election-time maneuver, Ottawa appears to be preparing to back up these words with action. In a series of statements, there have been hints that Canada may use its key resources, oil, gas, LNG, electricity, and automotive exports, as leverage against the United States. The promise that we will not back down is resonating with Canadian citizens, but it is causing growing concern in the U.S. The energy sector is at the forefront of this shift. According to official data, Canadian crude oil exports to the U.S. will surpass $70 billion in 2024, accounting for nearly 10% of U.S. oil imports. Canada also plays a significant role in natural gas and LNG supplies, sending approximately 9 billion cubic meters annually, which meets a considerable portion of consumption in several U.S. states. Carney stated on March 27, 2025, "We hold these trump cards because we have a neighbor that imposes unilateral tariffs on us." A subsequent message in the Canadian Parliament affirmed, "We can look for different markets for energy exports." In essence, Ottawa is signaling that it controls the flow of energy resources and is willing to use that power to its advantage. Given the U.S.'s heavy reliance on Canadian energy, many analysts believe this could present a major challenge for Washington. Electricity trade is another critical area. In 2024, Canada transferred around 65 terawatt-hours of electricity to the U.S., which accounts for 20% of consumption in certain regions. Canada, with its abundant hydroelectric power, has been able to sell electricity to the U.S. at favorable rates. On March 28, 2025, concerns arose about whether Canada might restrict these exports, either through higher taxes or other limitations. Such a move could increase electricity costs, particularly in northern U.S. states and in areas with energy-intensive industries. An anonymous official in the Prime Minister's office further inflamed the situation by announcing, "We are reviewing terms of trade in all areas, including electricity." This statement prompted much speculation in Washington about the potential disruption to U.S. production and daily life. The automotive sector also faces growing uncertainty. Canada's automotive and parts exports to the U.S. exceeded $30 billion in 2024, and a significant amount of automotive parts from the U.S. are shipped to Canada for final assembly. In response to U.S. tariffs, Carney has spoken about raising tariffs and reorganizing the automotive supply chain, signaling the end of mutual agreements. On March 28, 2025, Canada removed tax incentives for U.S. electric car companies, and rumors circulated about potential tariffs targeting specific manufacturers, including Tesla. Experts predict that such moves could increase production costs and raise prices for consumers. Ottawa, however, maintains that the issue lies with Washington's tariffs, not Canada's response. Agriculture is another sector that could feel the impact. Trade between Canada and the U.S. in agricultural products is valued at around $45 billion, particularly in wheat, canola, meat, and dairy. Carney hinted at potential new taxes on these products, warning that Canada's hand in agriculture is far from weak. In 2024, Canadian canola seed exports to the U.S. were worth approximately $6 billion, and any disruption in this trade could lead to soaring prices in U.S. markets. The potential impact on U.S. livestock producers, who rely on Canadian feed products, could also be severe. Carney's statement that "we will not always be on the losing side" has found broad support within Canada, but has raised alarms in the U.S., which relies heavily on Canadian agricultural imports. The U.S. is highly dependent on Canada for energy and agricultural products, with imports exceeding $460 billion annually in 2024. However, Canada is not only a supplier of raw materials, it also produces high value-added products. A disruption in this integrated supply chain could have profound consequences for both nations. On March 27, 2025, Carney warned that the complex interdependence between the two countries should not be tested by unilateral tariffs. While Washington has repeatedly called for fair trade, no clear resolution on Canada's retaliatory measures has been reached. The Trump administration's tariffs on Canadian steel and automobiles were a key catalyst for this hardening stance. There have long been tensions over various trade issues, including steel, aluminum, and agricultural products. On March 28, 2025, it was reported that Canada and the U.S. had engaged in several rounds of negotiations, but Washington's America First approach had left Ottawa feeling cornered. Carney's government is now seeking to strengthen trade ties with European and Asian markets. During visits to France and the UK, discussions focus on establishing alternative trade routes in energy and automobiles, leading European media to speculate that Canada may be stepping out of the U.S. shadow. One of the most widely discussed issues is whether Canada will cut off electricity exports to the U.S. A significant portion of Canada's hydroelectric and nuclear power is exported to the U.S., with total electricity exports valued at over $3 billion in 2024. If Canada chooses to leverage this energy resource, it could raise electricity prices in northern U.S. states, creating a ripple effect across the economy. Carney's statement on March 27, 2025, "We will put oil and electricity on the table," further heightened tensions, but U.S. officials have refrained from making any direct comments, with energy sector representatives warning of the devastating consequences for both countries. The automotive sector also remains a major point of contention. In 2024, Canada produced approximately 1.8 million vehicles, with over half of them destined for the U.S. market. The interdependence of the two nations' automotive industries makes it difficult for either side to gain a clear advantage. However, U.S. tariffs on Canadian vehicles could have serious implications for manufacturers like Tesla, Ford, and General Motors, especially if Canada imposes additional tariffs on imported automotive parts. Agricultural exports are another critical area. In 2024, Canada exported $5 billion worth of dairy products to the U.S., and disruptions to the supply chain could lead to skyrocketing prices for U.S. consumers. Carney's remarks on March 29, 2025, that there are no guarantees in any area, including agriculture, made it clear that Canada is prepared to escalate tensions. The trade relationship between Canada and the U.S. is vast and highly integrated, with total two-way trade estimated at over $900 billion in 2024. However, recent events have shown how fragile this foundation can be. Carney's March 27, 2025, statement about diversifying trade channels and seeking new markets in Europe and Asia signals a shift in Canada's foreign policy.